The night of March 9th, 1945 settled over Tokyo. Families gathered in their wooden homes, the scent of rice lingering in the air, unaware of the inferno soon to engulf them. Mothers tucked children into futons. Fathers, weary from ration lines, scanned the distant horizon. The city hummed with a deceptive calm, a fragile peace masking the storm brewing over the Pacific. From Guam, Saipan and Tinian, hundreds of B-29 superfortresses clawed their way into the night sky. Their bomb bays weren't filled with high explosives, but with M69 incendiary bomblets, cylinders of napalm, igniting at just 28 degrees Fahrenheit. General Curtis LeMay had gambled everything on this new strategy. No more high-altitude precision raids scattered by the jet stream. Tonight the bombers would fly low, stripped of their guns, carrying double loads of fire. Their target, Tokyo's Shitamachi district, home to 750,000 civilians. Tokyo slept, lulled into a false sense of security. Previous raids had been clumsy, scattered, even survivable. Tonight would be different. The winds were strong, the air dry, and the city, built of wood and paper, was a perfect tinderbox. In the hours that followed, the streets would roar like furnaces, rivers boil with desperate refugees, and the night sky glow so brightly that crews circling miles away would see Tokyo burning as if the sun had risen again. The world's most advanced bomber, a product of America's vast industrial might, was about to unleash the most devastating single air raid in history. To understand why Tokyo became an inferno, we must examine the strategy, the machines, and the choices that led to this moment. By early 1945, the Pacific War had reached a breaking point. Japan's once vast empire was crumbling under relentless Allied assaults. The American island-hopping campaign had seized the Marianas, Guam, Saipan, Tinian, bringing a terrifying new reality. The Japanese homeland was now within range of the B-29 superfortress. The B-29 wasn't just an aircraft. It was the embodiment of America's industrial and scientific might. Pressurized cabins, remote-controlled gun turrets, the most powerful piston engines of the war. It was a $3 billion investment, exceeding even the Manhattan Project. With its massive payload and long range, the B-29 was designed to bring the war to Japan's doorstep. Yet, early missions proved disappointing. At 30,000 feet, the jet stream scattered bombs miles from their targets. Cloud cover hid entire cities. Engines overheated. Mechanical failures were constant. The vaunted doctrine of precision bombing, the idea that surgical strikes from high altitude could cripple industry, collapsed in the face of weather and geography. Into this impasse stepped Major General Curtis LeMay, a man relentless, unsparing, coldly pragmatic. He believed precision bombing was failing. Japan's cottage industries, scattered within wooden neighborhoods, were impervious to pinpoint strikes. If Japan was to be broken, it would be by fire. LeMay drew inspiration from Italian General Giulio Douhet, who decades earlier had argued that wars would be won not just on battlefields, but by breaking the will of nations, by destroying their cities. For LeMay, the answer was clear. Abandon altitude and precision. Embrace fire. Meanwhile, Japan clung to outdated visions. Their decisive battle doctrine, born from the victory at Tsushima in 1905, dreamed of one great clash to decide the fate of nations. By 1945, this dream was obsolete. Air defences were fragmented between Army and Navy commands, radar was scarce, night fighters were few, fuel supplies were collapsing. Tokyo, the heart of the empire, was guarded by fewer than 500 heavy anti-aircraft guns, and a scattering of searchlights against over 300 B-29s. It was like raising bamboo spears against thunder. The stage was set for a transformation in aerial warfare, a shift from precision to area bombing. This wasn't just a tactical shift, it was philosophical. War was no longer confined to soldiers and fleets. Entire societies became targets. And on the night of March 9th, 1945, Curtis LeMay would put this new doctrine to the ultimate test. A storm of fire was about to descend, one that would sear itself into history forever. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress was a marvel born of desperation and ambition. By 1942, the United States understood a hard truth. Only a long-range bomber could bring the war home to Japan. The design consumed over 1.4 million engineering hours. Boeing, Bell, and Martin factories across the nation worked without pause. Each aircraft stretched 99 feet in length, with wings spanning 141 feet, driven by 4 Wright R3350 duplex Cyclone engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower. It was a machine of superlatives, capable of carrying 20,000 pounds of bombs and flying over 1,600 miles, reaching altitudes previously unthinkable for bombers. To American crews, the B-29 was both fortress and burden, a flying city of steel, a machine demanding discipline, precision, and endurance. For Japan, its shadow loomed like a nightmare. No other aircraft symbolized America's industrial power so clearly. While Japanese factories struggled to build even basic fighters, Wichita alone was producing more than 4 B-29s a day. Each bomber represented more labor, more resources, more technology than entire Japanese squadrons could muster. By early 1945, nearly 2,000 of these giants had rolled off assembly lines, a tide of aluminum that no blockade could stop, and yet the early missions were far from decisive. From bases in China, B-29s attempted precision raids at 30,000 feet, but bombs scattered in the jet stream, targets vanished behind clouds, engines overheated, failures multiplied. Japanese cities were struck but remained intact. Morale faltered. The doctrine of precision bombing, so celebrated in Europe, seemed futile in the vast Pacific. Skies then came Curtis LeMay. In January 1945, he took command of the 21st Bomber Command. Blunt, pragmatic, unsparing, he stripped the B-29s of most defensive guns, retaining only those in the tail positions. He replaced high explosives with fire. His reasoning was stark. Japan's cities were wooden tinderboxes. Its industries were dispersed among thousands of small workshops. Pinpoint strikes meant nothing. Fire would cripple Japan's war machine. The weapon of choice was the M69 incendiary bomblet, a slender steel cylinder filled with napalm, developed by Standard Oil and Harvard scientists. Unlike thermite or magnesium, napalm clung to wood, tile, flesh. It burned hotter, longer. A B-29 could carry 1,220 of these bomblets, packed in clusters designed to burst above city blocks. Tests in Utah proved the point. Replica Japanese homes were reduced to ash in minutes. This was no ordinary weapon. It was engineered not just to destroy buildings, but to ignite entire districts. Japan had no answer. Their night fighters, the Nakajima J-1 and Gecko and Kawasaki Ki-45 Toryu, were too few, too primitive. They lacked radar. They relied on searchlights to find intruders in the dark. Anti-aircraft guns were scattered, outdated, many without fire control systems. Fuel shortages grounded pilots before they could even train for night interception. Tokyo, the empire's beating heart, lay exposed. Thus, the American strategy evolved into something terrifyingly effective. No longer bound by altitude, no longer bound by accuracy, the bombers would fly low, individually streaming for hours, using the weather itself as a weapon. Dry winds to fan the flames, clear skies to mark the way. The goal was no longer to hit a factory here, a rail yard there. The goal was to create a firestorm, an inferno so intense it would consume an entire city. For centuries, Tokyo had survived earthquakes, floods, and wars, but against the B-29 and its cargo of fire, the city's wooden bones would not endure. Twilight faded over the Marianas on March 9th, 1945. On the runways of Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, ground crews worked in shadows, strapping clusters of incendiaries into the cavernous bays of the B-29s. Mechanics wiped oil-stained hands on fatigues. Engines coughed, then roared. The order rippled through the ranks. Tonight, Operation Meeting House would begin at 5:35 p.m. The first Silver Giant lifted from Guam's North Field, its 4 engines growling against the night. One by one, the others followed. Soon, the horizon itself seemed filled with steel wings and blazing exhaust. Inside the cockpits, crews sank into routine. Navigators traced courses on maps glowing under red lamps. Radios crackled with terse voices. Gunners, stripped of most weapons, sat in hollow, strangely empty stations. The planes were lighter than ever, built not to fight, but to burn. Beneath them stretched the fathomless 100 miles of the ocean, an endless black mirror that offered no forgiveness. Pilots steeled themselves for 14 hours of flight. Fatigue and tension would be their constant companions. Far across the sea, Tokyo glowed faintly under a crescent moon. In Shitamachi's wooden alleys, lanterns flickered as families prepared for sleep. Air raid sirens had become a ritual. Their wail was familiar, dismissible. Previous raids had left scars but not devastation. Many believed tonight would be the same. Parents kissed their children, unaware that by dawn those streets would be gone. At 10:30 p.m, the first distant drone reached Tokyo's outskirts. Sirens rose again, howling through narrow lanes. Few rushed to shelters. Only 18 concrete bunkers existed in a city of millions. Most families relied on shallow dugouts, wooden boards, holes in the earth. Useless against what was coming. Fire brigades stood ready, buckets, pumps, sand. Brave, but powerless against weapons born in laboratories thousands of miles away. Shortly after midnight, Pathfinder aircraft pierced the night. Flying at just 5,000 feet, they dropped M47 markers. Flaming pillars erupted, forming a burning cross visible for miles. It was a signal. Behind them came the main force, scores of B-29s descending from the darkness, bomb bay doors yawning open. At 12 a.m, the first wave released its cargo. Thousands of M69 bomblets spilled downward, each trailing a streamer to steady its fall. To those below, it looked like a deadly rain of metal. The bombs struck rooftops with hollow thuds. Seconds later, ignition. Napalm splashed in every direction, clinging to walls, ceilings, bodies. Within minutes, hundreds of fires blazed across the district. The winds, predicted by American forecasters, fanned them higher. Flames leapt from building to building. Narrow alleys became tunnels of fire. Smoke billowed upward into a churning canopy, glowing red against the sky. For the crews above, the sight was both mesmerizing and horrific. From altitude, Tokyo seemed to crack open, glowing rivers of flame carved across its surface. Pilots adjusted masks as smoke clawed into their cockpits. Aircraft shuddered in turbulence born of fire. On the radios, voices fell quiet, hushed by the scale of what they had unleashed. On the ground, chaos swallowed order. Families fled in torrents. Children clutched elders. Burning debris rained from above. Fire brigades abandoned their pumps. Their equipment melted in the heat. At the Sumida River, thousands pressed toward the banks, but the waters themselves burned with falling embers. Some leapt in, others suffocated in the crush. Survivors later recalled the roar, not the thunder of bombs, but the constant, furious voice of fire, the heat so fierce it seemed the air itself had caught flame. The raid continued for hours. Wave after wave passed overhead, each scattering another burden of fire. By the time the last bomber turned back across the Pacific, eastern Tokyo was no longer a city. It was a furnace. Its streets glowed with molten glass and smouldering ruin. Behind the departing superfortresses, the skyline of Japan's capital lit the horizon like a second dawn, a harrowing beacon visible to every crew returning across the dark ocean. The firestorm didn't begin in an instant. It grew like a living beast. At first, flames flickered separately across Asakusa, Honjo, Fukagawa, small clusters of burning homes. Then came the wind, gusts up to 45 miles per hour, whipping through narrow alleys, carrying sparks that lit blocks in seconds. Sparks became whirlwinds. Whirlwinds became tornadoes of fire. Tokyo itself seemed to breathe. Inhale with the pull of oxygen, exhale with the roar of flame. The ground temperature rose beyond imagination. Asphalt boiled, iron fixtures glowed red, roofs cracked and burst. Fragments sprayed across lanes where terrified families stumbled blindly. Survivors later spoke of the sound. Not bombs, not guns, but fire. A furious, constant roar that drowned everything. Children crying, police whistles, even the thunder of B-29s overhead. Tokyo had become an elemental battlefield. The enemy was not steel and shell. It was air turned into fire. In the Sumida district, Yoshiko Hashimoto clutched her infant. Her family fled through collapsing streets. Blocks fell like paper lanterns one after another, the alleys jammed with tens of thousands. Elderly stumbled and vanished. Children disappeared in the crush. The heat itself killed. Breath scalded lungs. Skin blistered in seconds. Her father forced her into the river, clutching the baby. She survived, but her parents, her sister, perished. Later she whispered, The memory of that night never leaves me. Elsewhere, despair turned to horror. Families packed into schools, temples, basements. They suffocated as oxygen vanished. At Kikukawa Elementary, only twisted metal remained. Hundreds had sought safety there. Tokyo's fire brigades, 8,000 men with pumps and buckets, were helpless. Water pressure collapsed, engines failed, firefighters retreated as their uniforms caught flame, some abandoned equipment as it melted beneath their feet. Even rivers became traps, debris burned on the surface, bodies floated in currents so hot that survivors called the water boiling. Above, the B-29 crews witnessed a nightmare. Pilots circled through turbulence created by the fire itself. Planes bucked and jolted like ships in a storm. Smoke climbed so high it stained the stratosphere. From altitude, Tokyo cracked open. Glowing rivers of fire carved through the city. Entire districts pulsed like veins of flame. On radios, voices fell quiet. Crews, many hardened by war, were unsettled. Not by enemy fire, but by the sight of an entire city consumed. Japanese night fighters scrambled, blind in smoke and darkness. Tracer rounds vanished into the furnace. Some pilots rammed in desperation, sacrificing themselves for a single kill. A few B-29s fell, but the losses were trivial compared to the destruction below. Anti-aircraft guns barked sporadically. Shells mostly fell without effect. Tokyo was not defended. It was surrendered to fire. By dawn, the inferno had consumed 15.8 square miles. Over 100,000 dead. 1 million homeless. The toll exceeded Hiroshima. It exceeded Nagasaki. Entire neighborhoods, Asakusa, Honjo, Fukagawa, had ceased to exist. Casualty figures varied. The US Strategic Bombing Survey said 88,000 dead. Tokyo Metropolitan Police reported 83,000. The fire department 97,000. Historians now agree at least 100,000 perished in a single night, over 1 million left homeless. The numbers eclipsed every other bombing raid in history, even Hiroshima, even Nagasaki. The physical destruction was staggering. Over 267,000 structures reduced to ruin. Factories that once produced vital aircraft parts gone. The backbone of Japan's industry, its cottage workshops hidden among civilian homes, obliterated. Beyond the material loss was something deeper. The annihilation of neighborhoods, extended families, traditions passed down for centuries. Survivors returned to streets they could no longer recognize. Landmarks erased, ash where homes had stood. For the Japanese government, the raid was humiliation. Authorities had promised strong defenses. They told citizens the capital could withstand American attack. Yet within hours, the illusion collapsed. Fire brigades were powerless, night fighters ineffective, shelters turned into tombs. Confidence in the state faltered. Refugees spread stories of devastation. Factories reported soaring absenteeism. Morale crumbled. For the first time, whispers of doubt about victory arose. On the American side, losses were minimal. 14 B-29s failed to return, most lost to mechanical failure or turbulence. 96 airmen killed or missing, a fraction compared to the destruction wrought. Pilots who survived spoke of what they had seen. Some felt grim satisfaction. The raid had succeeded where precision had failed. Others were shaken. One navigator admitted the glow of Tokyo's fires haunted his nightmares for years. General Curtis LeMay offered no apology. To him, the firebombing proved his doctrine. If I had lost the war, he said later, I would have been tried as a war criminal. But in victory, his strategy was celebrated. General Henry H. Arnold congratulated him. This shows you have the guts for anything. Within 10 days, the same tactics were unleashed on Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, each city suffering the same fate. For Tokyo's survivors, the aftermath was not measured in doctrine, it was measured in absence. Mass funeral pyres burned for weeks. Families carried urns of ashes, sometimes their own kin, sometimes strangers. Rivers clogged with wreckage, bodies pulled from currents so hot that survivors called the water boiling. Only after heavy machinery cleared the way could hospitals overflow. Doctors and nurses, many killed in the raid, tend to the endless wounded. Schools and temples once, anchors of community, were gone. The social fabric of working-class Tokyo was torn apart. Thousands of orphans, widows, displaced citizens with nowhere to go. The raid marked a turning point in the war's psychological dimension. Tokyo, long regarded as untouchable, had been reduced to ashes in a single night. The destruction revealed the futility of Japan's defences and the overwhelming might of America's industry. To the Allies, Operation Meeting House was a success. To Japan, it was a wound so deep it bled into the nation's soul. The firebombing of Tokyo, March 9th to 10th, 1945, remains the most destructive air raid in human history. In just 6 hours, more lives were lost than in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and yet the event is often overshadowed by the atomic bombings that followed. Operation Meeting House. That was the name written in American reports, but in truth, it was something more. It was the demonstration of industrial war at its most terrifying, blurring the moral boundaries of modern conflict. For Japan, the scars endured long after the flames died. Survivors carried trauma in silence, haunted by memories of family lost in the fire. Communities that had existed for centuries were erased overnight. The destruction of cottage industries crippled Japan's war production, but it also destroyed a way of life. Craftsmen, families, traditions, scattered forever. Tokyo's wooden heart never returned. The city rebuilt in steel, glass and concrete. A new capital born from ash. Internationally, the raid sparked uneasy questions. The Hague Conventions forbade the bombardment of undefended cities, but Tokyo was defended. Weakly, yes, but defended. Was it lawful, or was it atrocity? American planners pointed to workshops hidden inside homes, to factories embedded in neighbourhoods, to the argument of military necessity. But the overwhelming casualties were civilians, women, children, the elderly. LeMay himself admitted, "If we had lost, I would have been tried as a war criminal." Strategically, the firebombing worked. Within weeks, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe all burned the same way. By August, 66 Japanese cities had been reduced to rubble. Millions homeless, morale shattered. When Emperor Hirohito spoke of surrender, he mentioned a new and most cruel bomb. Historians believe he meant not only the atomic strikes, but also the months of fire that came before them. For military scholars, Operation Meeting House is a grim lesson. It showed how science and industry harnessed for war could annihilate entire populations in pursuit of victory. It proved that air power could bypass armies and navies, striking directly at the heart of nations. But it also revealed a limit. Even destruction on this scale did not bring immediate surrender. Total war consumed societies, but peace did not come quickly. Today, memorials in Tokyo honour the victims, but outside Japan their voices remain muted, overshadowed by the atomic bomb. Yet, the night Tokyo burned stands as a warning. In modern war, civilians become the battlefield, and the line between strategy and atrocity is perilously thin. The scale of destruction, the sheer number of civilian casualties, continues to fuel debate and underscore the devastating consequences of total war. The psychological impact on the Japanese people, the destruction of entire communities and ways of life, remains a profound and lasting legacy of that horrific night. The city rebuilt, but the memories, the scars, endure. When the sun rose over Tokyo on March 10th, 1945, the city was unrecognizable. Smoke curled from miles of ruins. Ash hung in the sky like a shroud. Where once stood vibrant districts of homes, shops and workshops, there was only blackened earth and skeletal fragments of buildings. The smell lingered. Smoke, oil, burned flesh. Heavy, suffocating. Survivors wandered in silence, dazed, their footsteps crunching over broken tiles and shattered glass. Entire wards, Asakusa, Honjo, Fukagawa, had ceased to exist. The aftermath was a scene of unimaginable devastation. The scale of destruction was almost incomprehensible. Entire families were wiped out, their homes reduced to ashes. The loss of life was staggering. The number of homeless was in the millions. The social fabric of the city had been irrevocably torn apart. The psychological trauma inflicted on the survivors was profound and long-lasting. Many struggled to cope with the loss of loved ones, the destruction of their homes and livelihoods, and the sheer horror of the experience. The firebombing of Tokyo was a turning point in the war, not just militarily, but psychologically. The city, once a symbol of Japanese strength and resilience, had been utterly devastated. The raid exposed the vulnerability of even the most heavily populated centers to the power of modern aerial bombardment. It shattered the illusion of invincibility that had sustained the Japanese war effort. The psychological impact of the firebombing contributed significantly to the declining morale of the Japanese population and helped to pave the way for the eventual surrender. For the American military, Operation Meeting House was considered a strategic success. The firebombing had achieved its objectives, crippling Japanese industry and breaking the will of the civilian population. However, the moral implications of the raid remained and continued to be a subject of intense debate and controversy. The sheer number of civilian casualties sparked outrage in some circles, raising serious ethical questions about the legitimacy of such tactics in warfare. Critics argue that the targeting of civilian populations amounted to a war crime. The debate continues to this day, underscoring the complex and often morally ambiguous nature of modern warfare. The use of incendiary bombs in Tokyo remains a highly controversial aspect of World War II. The immense civilian casualties caused by the firestorm sparked ethical questions that have persisted through the years. Critics argue that the targeting of densely populated civilian areas and the use of weapons designed to cause widespread burning and destruction constituted a war crime. The sheer scale of devastation and the resulting immense loss of life have been used to support claims that the firebombing of Tokyo was a disproportionate and excessive use of force. Proponents of the firebombing, however, emphasize the strategic aims of the operation. The argument is made that the destruction of industrial facilities located in densely populated areas, along with the disruption of civilian life, was a necessary measure to hasten the end of the war and ultimately save more lives. They highlight the immense challenge faced in accurately targeting military facilities, the challenges presented by the widespread distribution of small workshops in the midst of residential areas, and the need to find a way to effectively subdue the increasingly determined enemy after other methods had proved less effective. The legacy of the firebombing of Tokyo is complex and multifaceted. It stands as a stark reminder of the devastating power of modern warfare and the horrific consequences of targeting civilian populations. The immense loss of life, the destruction of homes and communities, and the lasting psychological trauma inflicted on the survivors serve as a potent symbol of the horrors of war. The event continues to be a subject of profound reflection, prompting a discussion about the moral responsibilities of military leaders, the ethics of warfare, and the implications of the widespread use of devastating weaponry. The firebombing of Tokyo is a somber chapter in the history of World War II. While it undoubtedly achieved its strategic aims, contributing significantly to the end of the war in the Pacific, it also serves as a grim reminder of the human cost of total war. It exposed the devastating consequences of targeting civilian populations and the horrific destruction caused by incendiary weapons. This event stands as a powerful testament to the destructive capabilities of industrial-scale warfare and the urgent need to prevent similar atrocities in the future. The memories of the victims, the